Greetings, everyone. I welcome you all to the interview series presented by LJRF Voice. I'm Maneesha Gopal. I'm a final year student at Govt.Law College, Trivandrum, and an editor trainee at LJRF Voice. And I will be the host for today's session. So once again, welcome you all for the interview session by LJRF Voice. So LJRF Voice is a registered society. LJRF is a registered society, and LJRF Voice is a platform which aims to help law students, lawyers, academicians, and other sections of society to access law and to improve constitutional and other legal literacy. And this interview session is a new initiative towards that goal. So it's what. So today we have with us a guest who is a legal professional having a profound expertise in academia in India and abroad. So, without much ado, let me introduce Dr.Rhea Roy Mammen to today's interview session. Ma'am, before we move on, just some informal talk. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you're pronouncing my name right. Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, the video is already being recorded.
Okay.
And we'll move on with a small introduction. Small introduction of ma'am, and then we will move on to the questions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I know you're tired after the university and all. So,
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
We'll make it as quick as possible.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Take your time. We have 1 hour.
Okay, ma'am. So, once again, greetings. Today, we have with us a legal professional. As I already mentioned, she has a profound expertise in legal field in India and abroad. But we can't go without formally introducing her. Dr. Rhea Roy Mammen successfully completed her LLB from CUSAT University, Kochi, and did her post-graduation in human rights and also her PhD from National Law School of India University, Bengaluru. She is currently an affiliated postdoctoral fellow at the Van Vollenhoven Institute, Netherlands, where she is engaged in a project titled Law School's Response to Climate Justice, which is implemented in both India and the Netherlands. Apart from that, she is a director of Research Development Institute, the Just Focus Research Institute at Leiden, Netherlands. Her passion for academia is remarkable, and she has also been the recipient of various prestigious international fellowships. Apart from that, Dr. Mammen is a Harvard certified trainer in higher education learning. She has contributed to various international and national projects, to notably the UNDP project on biodiversity, the Government of India project on India's response at the Paris Climate Change Convention to be precise, and the National Commission of Women's project on women's reproductive right. She is also an author and has authored 3 books, mainly the Handbook on Legal Research Methodology, A to Z on research, PhD and all. And she has also published numerous articles in Scopex Indexed, UGC Care List, and peer-reviewed journals. So this would be a very short, brief introduction of ma'am. So I once again welcome Rhea ma'am to today's interview session, and it's our deep honor and privilege to have you here with us today, ma'am. And looking forward
Thank
for a
you so
wonderful.
much, Maneesha. Thank you.
So, ma'am, shall we start?
Yes.
Ma'am, we would like to set the tone for today's discussion by starting from your graduation journey. Ma'am, what was your inspiration while taking up law? Is there any person or experience that influenced you?
Absolutely. So my mom's a criminal lawyer. She was a government pleader as well. So I think that was the reason that I wanted to choose law, but academia particularly because my grandfather was a visionary and academician and educationalist. He was into politics. And I've seen how academia education has influenced a larger crowd because he was with Balajana Sakyam and he was also founding member of the Kerala Congress. And his influence has reached to many people who was at the leaderly position in Kerala. So that was a reason why I chose law and academia. So I would say, yes, I did have strong inspiration to take up law.
That's so great to hear. So you have your mom, your grandparents, and It's great, ma'am. So we are moving on to the next question. Uh, as someone having worked in the field of experiential learning, especially in the context of legal education in India, what are some of the key areas where you would suggest the need for reform?
To start off is to accept that the 5-year course is good enough platform for students to prepare themselves. I think that kind of acceptance needs to come from the students as well as from the academia and the bar. So to start off, that kind of acceptance that law schools has a lot to offer than what is being offered right now is the first step. Second is to know that during the 5 years, you have a lot of space of to try out a lot of experiences or experiments with education itself. You don't necessarily need to have everything spoon fed. Unfortunately, we have a large number of institutions that's affiliated to a university who's obliged to comply with a lot of syllabus requirement. But it's also important to see that faculty must and should also enjoy a level of autonomy that they can implement some exercises within classroom itself. So if you look at a semester, you have approximately 80 to 100 hours in a semester, which is good enough time to actually take up some kind of mechanism that you engage the students with. But that, of course, requires the cooperation not just from the faculty, but also from the students and from the management. So, to look at it, I would say before we make any revolutionary change, from the basic alterations in the way the teaching methodology that is adopted, how it's approached, could be places that we could consider some kind of improvement.
That was indeed insightful, ma'am, because whenever we hear something, we everyone say about reforms, but these basic things are often missed out. Thank you for that. Ma'am, so regarding this, based on your study, so what are the hurdles faced by Indian law students in acquiring necessary skill set? So how they can acquire necessary skill set within a very short span of time, just like the students of abroad.
So, I know the fundamentally it's a mindset. One of the things that I've noticed between the two, I know this is not a very formal statement to make when you talk about mindset, right? The moment if you ask a student what they want to do and how they're going to utilize the 5 years, they would be looking out for internships, right? That's something that you've constantly heard about. Now, the question then you would have to ask the student is how well are you prepared for that internship? Have you done your background, including the faculty for that matter? Have you done that background or got that foundational training to take up an internship? Because why would an organization or an industry get a student to learn the foundation which has to be done within the law school, right? So I personally would start off with the mindset to make sure the students understand the importance of having the classroom learning during the course of time, because that's where you're setting a foundation, that's where you're getting your fundamentals, and that's like having a manual. I don't know if you're familiar with, you might be familiar with the IKEA products, right? Where you get the manual, so it's all DIYs, but all of that comes with a manual of description that you can do it on your own. So that becomes a fundamental for it, right? That's the first part that I would say that makes a distinction factor here, because when I teach the students here, they come to the classroom with the attitude, and of course, they come with a background understanding. So that's something that I learned is a distinguishing factor. But I see there's a growing difference in it, so which is a good thing. Second thing is to know that to understand the subjects not in silos. So most of the time, we understand the subjects in its standalone format. So when you're studying constitution law, we tend to look at constitution in silos and not connect to what is the role of sociology in constitution, political science in constitution. What is the interdisciplinary nature that goes in? Because when you look at the skills, it's important to identify what are the skills that you're referring to, right? So it's important to not look at the subject in silos, but to see how each of these subjects are correlated. The third thing I would say is to pre-identify what are the skills that you're trying to gain through the 5-year course or the 3-year course. as a lawyer. So if I ask a student, how many of us are actually aware about, maybe now it might be improved, but when I did my field, seldom students were aware about what were the skills that they need to gain. So when you talk about skill set, what is it we are looking at? That needs to be clarified between the students, between the teachers and the management, overall to understand, okay, what is the skill set that I need to achieve by the end of 5 years? How am I going to break it down through the semesters? And how am I going to cumulatively gather them by end of my 5 year course? Say, for example, the Harvard Center has identified 10, which is accepted by the Bar Council, and that's what we are following for our legal education as well. So, if you're going to take the foundational 5 or the 10 skills and the subsets of those skills, what we need to see, so this cannot work again in its independence. So, this requires a cooperation of these three entities, right? So, if that's the case, when as a student, you have the obligation to know, since I believe your target audience is primarily going to be the students and the faculty. So let's say I'm addressing the students. As students, you would need to know what is that you are expected to gain by end of the semester and end of the year and end of the 5 years first. So you have the responsibility to ask this question to the teachers, right? So set your expectations right to know what is that I am going to gain through this subject. Now, once you know that your skills that you require, for example, they're going to identify legal research as standard skills for all the subjects. Then you would have a skill, say, negotiation, for instance, or drafting, for instance. Now, once you've identified, say, 2 or 3 skill sets in a semester, the next question that you would need to clarify is, okay, how are we going to attain this during the course of the 6 months we're good together? Now that question should be to see, okay, if we're gonna have prominently the lecture session, how am I as a student going to contribute to it? So is the teacher going to give you some readings, or are you expected to come back, or you would probably know what is the topic for the next day? Are you going to do a background understanding of the subject? That's a basic research. Second question is, okay, how are you going to assess me for the assignments? Are you are you going to mark me for copy pasting, or are you going to let me think on my feet? Now, for the question, for example, contract has a drafting element. Now, if a contract assignment is given to you and they say, okay, take up a standard contract and evaluate. Now, all of us would be using, say, YouTube, or you would be using any of those social medias. Maybe one of the assignments would be to evaluate and analyze the contractual terms of those social media accounts. Now, as a student, if my assignment is that, then I'm going to be doing my basic research to understand what are my rights and what are the compromises that I'm making. How is a standard contract drafted? So that way, I have a set idea about what is the skills that I'm expected to achieve, and to see through the evaluation if I've achieved it. So, irrespective of how your end term assessment is going to be. See, if all of us would have an excuse of, you're ultimately assessed on or semester end exams, that's fine. But you have your 6 months to learn those progress. You have an assignment that you mandatorily submit. There is a presentation that you do. So even if it's for 20 marks, as a person, if I want to develop my skills, I'm sure my faculty is also there to support me in that. But make that communication clear and set those expectations right. And usually now what I see in colleges doing is they have a document that sets out the learning outcome, teaching methodology, the mapping of all of this, so that the student, the teacher is on the same footing when they come to the classrooms. So I think there are different mechanisms. This is just an example that I was throwing into seeing how you can gain those skill set through your 5 year course.
Yes, ma'am, it was indeed really insightful, because as a student myself, I can too much relate of that gap is still there in our education system, and it's really insightful, ma'am. So now that we have almost discussed about some of the factors of legal education in India, my next question is particularly for law students who are wishing to go abroad. So, as a person who has been an international fellow, as ma'am has received the Indo-Canadian Shastri Fellow to Canada, and the Linus Plant Fellow to Sweden. It would be great to know some of the fellowships and opportunities for higher studies that the Indian students could explore, and how can students make themselves eligible for it.
Okay, that's actually a very broad question. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it all because all of because there are numerous fellowships that's out there, and primarily I was focused on fellowships for my research, so I looked into that. But to give you a few, there are so many fellowships that the European countries, UK, offer for students who want to do their master's program. For example, Erasmus is a classic example for many of the European colleges that supports master's students, especially from countries like India, to do their masters here, a fully funded program. Then you have the Commonwealth Fellowship to UK. That's again, once you acquire an admission, then you have the completely funded program. Then you have the Sheving then fellowship, the Rhodes Scholar, that's again for master's students. Then you have the Fulbright Scholarship that's for masters in US. Then you have the DAT Fellowship that's to Germany. I think it's particularly for air and space law. Then you have I believe you have quite a few fellowships also in India itself. To be specific, I think it's a Tata Foundation scholarships, or you have the Infosys. In fact, the Infosys also has a master's level. If you're looking at a master's level, Infosys also has fellowships that provide for your funding for your, at least in terms of your tuition fees, when you want to try and come here. And in fact, institutional wise, there are so many specific scholarships that's given, depending on the specialization that you want to take. But if, like, say, if you have child rights, or if you want to take commercial law, or depending on the type of specialization, the institution and the target university that a student is looking at would also have a large number of fellowships. And yeah, I think that is an overview about the scholarships and fellowships that you can look at. Apart from that, there are also options as an exchange fellow, which permits you to spend a semester here, and that's also covered by a lot of scholarship, and I believe that's something that the students should also utilize. And I understand there's a bit of challenge because not every university permits a credit transfer, and that's something that as Indian students we face, because with the variant type of assessment, so many of the students don't so many of the universities don't encourage credit transfer. So in that case, I would say look out for summer schools. Like the Hague Academy Summer School is a classic example that usually open for professionals. And that's on a higher end. So when you look at the summer schools by Hague Academy, that we have for private international as public international, they have in summer as well as in winter, depending upon the nature you have, you are developing your network. So similarly, so many of these universities have it. Like for example, Leiden University along with Edinburgh is also offering a summer school. Leiden University is going to have quite a few, including the ones from our department, is going to have summer schools in June and July. And as I understand, so many of the universities, at least some of the universities, have holidays during then. And I would totally recommend not just the master's student, also graduate students, I mean undergraduate students, to utilize these opportunities. The reason is experiences is what you carry. When you know what kind of intellectual discussion or that atmosphere that you're part of, that builds you up. See, you can attend something online, right? But that is not going to give you that experience. Google is going to be a teacher. You don't need someone to share the information with you. ChatGPT and Google would actually do a better job than so many of us giving you information, right? They'll give you precise information. But the experiments, experiences, the implementation of these informations, how each person perceives it, how it gets done in practice, is what makes a difference. And these are some areas that students can greatly use. So just to note down, give you a little more for the students' benefit. For example, if you look at, I see that a lot of scholars come for the Hague Academy. And I see, especially because most of the classes would have ICC prosecutors or faculty who are representatives at the ICJ are engaging with these sessions. They get an insight into the challenges as well as the gray areas in these principles in its practice. So those kind of add value to your learning.
That was remarkable, ma'am. One thing is the way it was such a broad question, but the way you handled it, and also I think to sum up what you said, exchange programs, summer schools are also better options like fellowships, but which most of Indian
Yes.
students are unaware of. And also, I think it requires a bit of self awareness to know what you
And
work best for.
also, because one thing I just wanted to point out here was just the other day, I was talking to an Indian student here who saw that there was a lot of vacancy in the hostel because so many of the students from UK, including Oxford and Cambridge, or so many of the students from US was here in Leiden on a semester exchange. And Leiden University has 80 universities on an exchange agreement, and there is none with Indian universities, which was a surprise that we recently got in an MOU with Govt.Law College Ernakulam to facilitate this, and I hope it works out. But otherwise, there's a reluctance because we understand the cost that's borne on, right? It's a bit expensive, but there are two ways to look at this. One is including ICSSR or ICCSR, one of those or the institutes, and there are these institutes that fund such kind of exchanges. So if you're not directly funded by the organization, you can find alternative funding mechanism. The other way to look at it is also see it as an investment into your learning, just like how you would do for a college education, right? So when you make, and I've seen students, at least on an advanced level, do that kind of investments because these experiences kind of pay off at a later point. It's something that I saw.
So, uh, the what you added up is also really important because we really see that there is less exchange programs are from India. Ma'am, my next question is also connected with what you have said. So, what advice would you give to law students in India who aspire to study abroad?
I would say it's definitely a good thing. I mean, coming to have an experience. Now, when please, one of the requests I would have is come with some experiences, right? Say, instead of doing a master's abroad immediately, figure out a career path, work for a while. Then, when you come here, you don't feel the financial burden because let's accept it. Doing a master's abroad, unless you're on a scholarship, you have a financial burden. Either your parents are bearing it or you are bearing it through an educational loan. And that's not a very nice feeling once you're done with the course because then your priority would be paying off that loan than utilizing the information that you've gathered through these courses, right? So once you have a career, let's say at least 5 years of experience, and you have planned a master's program in line, and you've done your financial saving towards it, then you come here for a course, then the experience is different. Because most of the master's students who have come here are with some kind of work experience. They would have taken sabbatical from their workplace, joined here for masters. Because most of the masters, at least I can speak for Leiden, is our advanced courses that engages with real drafting and exercises that will utilize your experiences. So when you come immediately for a master's program, your contribution could also be minimal that you won't completely get the benefit of it. Then it would be just like surviving through the master's. That doesn't make sense, right? Surviving through a graduation is different from surviving through a master's because it's an optional program. So when you're taking that financial burden, come with an experience. Second, try to find out what is the specific subject that you want to get your master's on. So some people would take it because the trend lies in it. For example, one of the right now trend is AI and law. Now then the question is, why do you want to do AI and law? Does your career demand it? Does your passion demand it? Or is it because everybody's doing AI and law and that's what you're doing it? So give yourself some time while you're spending time in your career to see what is the masters that you want to engage yourself with, and then identify that program, and then identify the university like that. Got it? So that you and the time that you've given, because the 10 months is all the, yeah, I think it's just 10 months that you would be investing in it, is going to be extremely intense. You are going to be losing out on sleep. You're going to be losing out a lot of things. You're going to be away from your family. That extremely intense. You need to be prepared for that intensity, and also you need to have that interest to given that intensity, right? So I would suggest that's the kind of background that could be done when you want to do your masters.
Great, ma'am. Great piece of advice, and I would help. I really think that this would benefit a lot of students, and because you are seeing a lot of students in your life as well. So thank you
Yes,
for that.
and I see there's a if and I was fortunate to meet so many of the Indian students, and when you look at the demography, there's lopsidedness to certain kind of institutes, and it's not because the other institute students are incapable. I've been amused to see some of those institutes who probably not be in that ranking, still students have come with full scholarship against those highly ranked institutes. And I've been amused by those students to see how amazingly they do well. And what distinguished them was the experience they carried. Because when it comes to, at least, I can only speak for Leiden University here, they care about what you've studied, they care about what you have contributed, they care about what you want to do, and they care about what you worked on. So that's very important, these four things. So your CGPA or your marks is definitely a fundamental cutoff, invariably. But apart from that, they want you to see, okay, have you done consistent working? Have you worked with an organization over the 5 years? So the student who got the scholarship, she's been working with social organization for 13 years. And I'm talking about a 26, 27-year old. So when she's working 13 years means she's been working with organizations from she was 13 years, right? So through her 5-year course, through after that, those experiences is what actually got her also the scholarship. So those kind of things is very important. So it's also important that you look beyond that 9 to 4. So what do you do after your 4 o'clock? No, for a simple example, just adding to the benefit of the student. You would have NSS active in your class, school, I mean, institute, sorry. You might also have NCC, legal aid clinics, different centers. Those are classic areas where you can contribute yourself. Say, for example, utilizing those platforms. Now, as simple as, the classic exercise that you do through NSS would be Swachh Bharat. Now, every 2nd of October, you would go clean one specific area that you've cleaned every 5 years. Now, do you have a consistent running program that you've contributed and shown a progress about? Like, take it as a research activity. You have identified an area near your college. I'm not too familiar with Trivandrum, but with maybe a specific area. You identify, like, say, 5 core groups among your friends. You identify an area why it's not maintained by the municipality, for example. Then you would look out 3 aspects. One would be the legal framework, one would be the social framework, and the interconnection. Then you would say, okay, they have the responsibility to maintain this area, which they have failed. Now, your requirement would be to understand why they have failed. What is that can be done to improve that? all of these experiences, when it comes out as a report or you send it out, or you through your NSS, you engage or you work with the municipality to clean up the area. Simple example. That experience can actually get you also a scholarship at Harvard. And if you actually talk to people who have won these scholarships, they have these experiences made. So if you look at the so-called, top institute, they do it as a fancy activity, maybe. I mean, don't mind my words, but something that is resume building. Because ultimately, if you look at all of these world ranked institutes, their strong pillar is social commitment. And they take that very seriously. So, as where you remember, you're called as social engineers. When Roscoe Pound called you a social engineer, they were not joking. And at least in Leiden University, it's taken very seriously. So, how have you, as a legal student, contributed to the community? Because only then them investing in you makes sense, right?
That's really great, ma'am. A kind of information that we know, but we don't know. I think
Yeah.
yeah. In our college also we have this legal aid clinic, and hopefully I was part of it, and we visited a panchayat and conducted a survey there. And as part of that, we held an adalat while solving the disputes and all. So actually, it was a really great experience. And ma'am, just saying that reminded me of this survey. It was just last month.
Exactly. Beautiful. Wonderful. Yeah.
So ma'am, uh, next, I would like to ask about what has been the most exciting part of working at Leiden University so far, from your experience?
I think the only exciting part in the Netherlands is the university here for me. So the most exciting part is the academic atmosphere. I mean, something that I've always longed for, and that believe that academia has a lot to contribute to the community, which I kind of felt the difference in India. Uh, the way the disconnect that comes in between academia industry is very minimal, I would say, when it comes to Leiden, because for the government or for the community at large, university is the fourth pillar. So all the research that goes from here is directly has an impact on the community, because we believe in something called as the valorization, that any research conducted must have a social relevance, social impact, and it must be implementable. So even from PhDs in employment, that gets converted to these implementable projects. So the academic atmosphere, how academia is treated here in total, as basic as the respectful attitude that's shown to academia, and that kind of relationship, that respect goes in relationship between the scholars, students, and the faculty. So that's something I thought was a striking feature at Leiden University. Because if you look at it, Oppenheimer, he's from here, Grotius, he's from here, and all of them are people we look up to, right? And they're from academia, including the ICJ, for instance, referred to their principles and their textbooks. Albert Einstein was here. So you have, you name it, all of these renowned personalities are from the academic field. And that's only because that respect and that space was given. So yeah, that ability of academia to contribute, recognition of academia is what I thought was distinct factor.